Okay, so we've got our knife sharpened. Let's go ahead and start cutting chickens. First thing is I like to use fairly heavy kitchen gloves. This makes it easier not just to cut the chickens, I find, but also your hands don't get so greasy, and with the rubber it's easy to grip them. But I also find when you're cutting chickens up that there's a lot of real small bones that might cut and scratch you. So I find that the gloves actually help protect my hands a little bit. Okay, so the chickens, we like to use whole chickens. These are organic that we purchase from the store. We haven't found yet a farm where we could do organic chickens, so we just get these from the store. And then usually they include some of the neck, the chicken liver in there, so you make sure you take that out so you've got a nice whole clean chicken that you can cut up. So what I do is I've got a cutting board here, and then I'll start with either my small or my medium-sized knife. And then what I will start doing is working on the legs and the wings. And these knives are nice and sharp, so it's going really quickly. If I didn't have such sharp knives, then it would be a lot harder to cut. And then I noticed that you're cutting more and more, and that can actually get dangerous because you can end up cutting yourself. Or if you're working with chickens with their sharp bones, sometimes you end up gripping it harder because it's not cutting as well. So that also can lead to cutting the glove or even cutting your skin. So I've just done the two legs, so now I'm working on the wings. Nothing special, just making sure I get them off in pieces so I can get them in the grinder. Okay, so now we've got the legs and the wings off, and then we'll work on the body. Usually what I want to do is start slicing the body down the center. And here's when you start to expose some of these sharp bones, so you kind of have to be careful as you're working with this to try and get this split apart. Okay, then I've got some of the breast here, so I'll start to pull some of that off. Make it smaller so we can grind that up there. And that's doing pretty good there. So now I'll switch to using my larger knife so that I can get this split apart better, easier. So again, this is a nice sharp knife. It's going through here real well. When I get to my third chicken, I notice that this gets dull, so that's why I stop after 2 chickens usually and then end up sharpening my knives again. Okay, so at this point I've pretty much pulled apart the chicken. These pieces are generally going to be a good size to get into my grinder. Depending upon your grinder, you might have a larger one, so you don't have to do as much cutting. You may have a smaller one, so kind of all varies on your grinder. But now that that chicken is ready to go, we can actually start grinding. So what I'm going to do from here is I will quickly pull my gloves off and then set them aside there so I can go over and get my grinder and get it set up. So I'll do a quick wash of my hands. I've got some soapy water down here that I just keep on the side for things like this. So I've already got my grinder set up, but well, a couple things. A lot of different kinds of grinder, but they sort of look like this, so they're fairly easy. With our grinder, we purchased this and it came with 3 blades. We use the coarsest blade, so, or this is the strainer that has the largest holes. We have 2 other strainers that have smaller holes, but I find you don't need to do that. This is plenty of the right size. You don't need to go any smaller than that. And then for our particular grinder, we use the Waring brand, which we've been pretty happy with. When you put this, screw this on, you don't tighten this, just very loosely put it on so it's barely on, and then back it off a quarter, a half inch, because what I find is that the pressure pushing the meat through will push the blade and all against here, and then you'll have a heck of a time trying to get this off for cleaning. So just make sure that's very lightly on and then back it off a little bit. So what I like to do is I like to set my grinder up in the sink if you have space to do that, because it's just a lot easier to grind down there and actually you just minimize splatter, so particularly of the meat juices coming from the chicken. So I like to do it down here. And then I won't show you the grinding because it's pretty straightforward, but you know, you'll flip it on, you'll grind it through here. We'll have a plastic container that we use. Did you catch it? And then we'll take that and then we'll put it in our mix. So now today you can actually do the cutting and your grinding on a separate day. So I'm actually cutting and grinding up the chicken today, and I'm not assembling all the ingredients. So typically what I like to do is I like to grind my chicken up on days that I don't assemble, and then I'll go ahead and put it in containers and actually freeze it. And the reason why I like to separate a little bit is it just, if I do everything in one day, it kind of ends up being a long morning. You know, it takes me 3, 4, maybe 5 hours, so I kind of like to split things up. So one day I might grind my chickens, the next day I might grind my fruits and vegetables, or I find that with my fruits and vegetables that sometimes if I buy too much that we're consuming, then I'll go ahead and grind up what I don't use for Sue and I to consume, and then I'll grind that up for the dogs, and then I'll grind it, put it in containers and set it aside and freeze it. So I find I kind of like to do it that way because it just sort of splits the tasks up. So on the day when I actually assemble ingredients, it only takes me a couple hours. I make 100, 110, 120 pounds of meats, and I'm not sitting there for half a day trying to prepare everything. So that's the way I do it and my process, but you can certainly do it all on the same day if you want. Okay, so this is now all set. We'll go ahead and grind the chicken. Now one last piece, and make sure that you know, if they give us some of the chicken liver and chicken heart, that you also include that in grinding it up. One last piece that's really important is that depending upon the grinder that you bought, we purchased this and they gave us these kind of flimsy plastic utensils so you can help push meat down. Those are pretty much worthless. You push them down too far, the plastic actually gets caught in the blade and then gets ground up in the food, so you don't want to do that. So, and they're also very flimsy, so sometimes you have to exert quite a bit of force to come down. So I sort of fashioned this piece of wood, I kind of chipped away, make this a little bit round so that it fits in here. It's nice and big, it can handle a lot of force, so this works really well when you're actually pushing meat down. Sometimes you have to push with pretty good force to actually get some of those bones to feed in. So depending upon what you buy, they may come with something that's nice and solid, or you may be able to buy something that's metal, or just do what I did and fashion something out of a piece of wood. So that about covers it on the grinding side. And chicken is, the grinder will easily grind up all those soft chicken bones, and obviously chicken bones is a very healthy, good source of calcium. So most of the time when I prep food, I include chicken, but some months I don't, just because I want to give the dogs a break away from chicken. Whereas like some months I may, instead of using beef, I'll use bison instead of beef. I like to rotate the foods as much as I can. So some months I don't do chicken, and in that case I'm going to include more eggshell powder to make sure they get their calcium supplement in there. And eggshell powder we'll discuss later. So this is now all ready to go, but other kinds of meats that I might grind is, normally I get all my other meats ground. but sometimes if we get liver from like the cows that we purchase, it's not ground, so I will go ahead and grind it as well. If I include heart as well, that's not ground, I will cut it up and then also grind it here as well. You don't want to try and grind up anything thicker than a chicken bone. You definitely don't want to do beef bones or anything like that, any red meat bones, because they won't go through this grinder. Actually, I don't think you can buy a grinder. They'll get cut up. They're just, those bones are too hard, and you'd have to purchase something on a commercial basis if you want to do any kind of grinding of those kinds of bones. So I think that covers the grinding itself. Fairly straightforward and simple, but this is my setup and how I've done it. If you do something similar, then you'll kind of find that in this process you'll develop your own nuances and it should work well for you. Okay, the other thing that I wanted to point out is going back to my utensil for pushing meat down into the grinder. I fashioned this wood utensil. You might think that it's not very sanitary using wood because you get some of the chicken pieces caught in there, and that may be the case. I've never had a problem with it. I think it's more comes down to your cleaning regimen, which is something that I will go through in detail. Some of the cleaning agents, particularly vinegar that I use, everything gets soaked in vinegar. Then I set this aside to dry completely. It's the only thing I use to grind meat with, and we only grind meat for the dog. So I'm fairly comfortable using wood, but if you feel for sanitary purposes you'd rather have metal, that's fine. I'm sure you can purchase them, but we just decided to, we had a piece of wood, so I fashioned it this way to make it